What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the THI podcast, obviously brought to you by TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, joining me as he always does. You guys know the name. It's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for those who don't know, and this is the other podcast we're putting out. So I guess I'm not going to tell you to pause and go watch the other one, but I would recommend watching the one we did before this first, where we kind of talk about what Carolina's lost in their transfer portal and kind of analyze that a little bit more. And then today, AJ, in this podcast, we're going to be talking about kind of the reshaping of the roster and the team that Hubert Davis and his staff, kind of the challenge that awaits him this offseason and what that's going to look like over the next, month or two in particular. So I'm interested in kind of hearing your take on how Hubert's task and if the program's in maybe a fork in the road moment right now. And I know you hit on that a little bit later. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, but I'll throw this in there. Paxton Wojcik is as of right now, as the day we're recording this on Wednesday evening, is the only commit that Carolina has landed as of right now in the transfer portal, obviously coming from Brown. So that's where the Tar Heels are at right now. And we'll definitely be looking to add more guys. And I would expect some more guys to probably commit over the next few days in particular as well, and especially over the next few weeks. So AJ, when you look at the guys, they've lost 6 guys as of right now in the portal. So there's obviously a major reshape that needs to take place, not only because they only have 2 guys coming in the freshman class, but you've just got scholarships you have to fill, especially with guys like Pete Dance, and Leaky Black leaving. There's just open spots that the Tar Heels have to fill, and that's going to be the challenge this offseason. So when you look at the challenge that awaits, I think it obviously is a challenge. Just like when you have to bring in that sheer amount of numbers and kind of make them bed into a team and unite as one, that's always going to be a challenge. But I think it's also an opportunity for Hubert Davis, AJ, because there's been so much criticism labeled at him. But one of kind of the caveats to it has always been, well, it's not his team. It's not his team. Yeah. These are not his guys. These are not the guys he recruited. So we'll give him a little leeway with that. He's got the opportunity this offseason to build his team. Next year's team will be his team. And I think that's when we'll really know a lot more. So talk to me about the challenge that awaits Hubert Davis this offseason and just the challenge ahead, because there's no doubt about it. You got to bring in bodies. You got to bring in the right guys, and you've got to get this ship back on the right track. And I don't think it's going to be easy. I'll just put it that way.
Well, I was definitely not one of the ones pounding my chest about this isn't his team, because it was his team. He was on the staff that brought him in, and he was the one that stuck with Dontrez, sort of re-recruited Dontrez and DeMarco when he got the job and brought them in. And one of his kids he brought in as a freshman this past year is gone already. So, and he did bring in a lot of guys out of the portal. He gets credit for that. So the Garcia didn't work out. McCoy did what McCoy did. Brady did work out. Nance just never fit from a basketball standpoint. So yeah, it was his team, but let's operate under the belief that it really wasn't. So those people had a little something. There was something to what they were saying. Now they can't say that. I know that he didn't bring in technically Armando and RJ, but you could say he did, because he welcomed them back. What you're going to see on the roster is everybody that he wanted back that also wanted to be back. It wasn't one of those deals. These aren't four-year contracts. A scholarship is a series of one-year deals, basically.
Yeah.
And you don't have to renew it each year. So a coach can determine, and quite frankly, coaches are running kids out more now than they ever have before.
Yeah, with the portal,
because the portal and NIL gives them license to do that. Like, hey, you guys want to be pros? Well, we're going to treat you like pros. I've covered all 4 major pro sports. I covered NHL, NFL, and NBA much more closely because I want to avoid baseball, because what you see back there, I want to at least remain.
You don't want to lose that fandom. Team. I hear that, man. I hear that.
Yeah, I didn't want to lose my fandom, so I stepped away from baseball a long time ago. Plus, in North Carolina, there's no major league team. But I will tell you right now, it's hardcore. Mm-hmm. It's a production-oriented business. You either produce or you're gone. In college, it's always been a little bit different. There's always been the idea of time. He's got a couple of years because he's going to be a junior. He's going to be a senior. I think that train has left the station in most cases. I would think that Hubert would like to still keep some of that in his program because he wants to model it the way Dean did things. He wants to model the way Roy did things. I think that's the kind of person that he is. But at the same time, his number one objective is to win basketball games. That's his number one objective. It's not to graduate guys. It's not to have amazing Wednesday afternoon meetings during the course of the week where they talk about anything but basketball, which are wonderful things, right? His job is to win basketball games. That's what he's going to be judged by, because he's got all the other attributes. But if they don't make the NCAA tournament next year, he may not be around after that. It doesn't matter whether it's him or anybody. If you're Kansas, Kentucky, or North Carolina, you miss the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row, you got to make a change, because there's no excuse to do that. It happens occasionally once. It can never happen 2 years in a row. So there is a little pressure on Hubert going into next year. And I think that he is responding and reacting to what happened this year and what he needs to do moving forward. The positive thing is a guy that people criticize for not being able to make tough decisions before has made tough decisions in the last couple of weeks. He's had very challenging conversations with a lot of the players on this team that were on the team, many of whom are no longer on the team, even though they have eligibility remaining. That's why they're not on the team anymore. So I think you're seeing a guy who has the benefit of 2 years of intel of being a head coach step back and look and say, whoa, a lot needs fixing. And it begins with personnel, because whatever it is he wants to run, and we can agree or disagree on some of the approaches, on the way too many set plays, not enough running, a lot of things. We can get into that in the summertime. We can really parse through some of that stuff. But first and foremost, personnel. I mean, one thing that absolutely will not work is whatever Hubert wants to do, it's not going to work if he doesn't have four guys out, four guys that could have to be guarded out. Pete didn't fit. He was almost like a guy playing in sand and disrupted everything else that was out there. And that's not a criticism to Pete. Just didn't fit. He fit great at Northwestern. That's why he was all Big Ten. It didn't fit with what Carolina wanted to do. So Hubert needs to find guys that fit. And if he's going to make tweaks in their approach, he needs to find guys that will fit into what those tweaks will be. And I do think there'll be some tweaking. There's no doubt about it. I think that there's a lot of self-evaluation that's going to take place. But first and foremost, because the portal's now, he's got to get the guys. And I think the tweaking will happen over time. And a lot of it will be determined by personnel. But he knows what he wants. Paxson Wojcik is the first part of that. Everyone's saying, oh my God, they traded Caleb Love for Paxson Wojcik. That's not what they did. They lost a group, and now they're going to bring in a group, and he's just the first one that committed. That's all. And he's a part. And he's a part where he can play 2 or 3. And he's a guy that has a lot of experience. He'll be 23 during the season. Hubert's not going to have to worry about effort. He's not going to have to worry about, recognition on the floor. If you watch him play, he plays well off people. He's not a springy, super bouncy guy, but you want guys to play well off of one another. That's what you need, right? That's the first thing you need. That's what this club didn't do. Every time a set play broke down, it was chaos on the floor. And they got to avoid that. So if you have guys out there with better instincts and a more natural ability to play off one another, then when things break down, you can still have beautiful basketball. You can still have poetry in motion, which is what we see from a lot of the teams that have advanced in the tournament. We see poetry in motion when things break down. We didn't see that from Carolina. So Hubert has an opportunity now to reshape things into what his vision of Carolina basketball being over the next 15 years. I think it really begins in year 3, but I also think year 3 is the year we're really going to judge him hard, because there are no exterior excuses. It's not going to happen. It's totally 100% Hubert Davis's DNA all over everything, and he needs to get to the tournament.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's different levels. You can maybe do it at Minnesota, but when it comes to these blue blood programs like Carolina, again, like you said, if you miss a tournament twice, that's just not going to cut it. That's not going to be allowed. And that's not the standard that this program's set. Just again, walk in the Smith Center and look up, and you'll understand why. I want to talk about the challenge in ways that kind of awaits him this offseason, because I think we knew going into the offseason that things needed to be adjusted, things needed to be changed. Hubert needed to learn, needed to kind of look himself in the mirror, just like some players that are coming back need to do a little bit as well, and say, okay, what am I trying to instill? What kind of coach am I trying to be? What adjustments do I need to make this offseason? And how can I get this, ship back on course and headed in the right direction, because it felt like it kind of was after year one. I know it was kind of a little bit of a false dawn in hindsight, but again, you can't take credit for he was able to push the right buttons and get that team to a national championship game and up by 15 at halftime. He deserves credit for that, rightly so. Wow. A lot of that money in the bank.
It's more amazing to think now.
I know, isn't it though? It really is, man. Yeah. It really is. And a lot of that money in the bank, unfortunately for him, because of how last year went down, is gone now because of the struggles that last year's team had, and the negative records, for lack of a better word, that they set, which we're not going to talk about because we've already listed those off ad nauseum in other podcasts. But when you look at, I look at it two ways. Hubert needs to improve and learn as a coach. I think anybody would agree with that. I think that's the guy that's coming in as a brand new head coach with no experience in year 3. There's always going to be learning curves. He needs to continue to develop and learn as a person. Now, you've also got this other challenge of, okay, 6 guys have left. I've also lost a couple seniors. I've only got 2 guys coming in this freshman class. I don't have a choice but to go find bodies. Not only find bodies, AJ, Hubert doesn't need to go out and find a 6th or 7th man in particular. He needs to find guys that could come in and start and fit his system. So to me, that's a big challenge. For me, it's a fork in the road moment, AJ, because it was always going to be a challenging offseason. Even if you returned his whole roster from last year, it was always going to be a challenging offseason because things needed to change and things needed to get back on the right track. But now, instead of focusing maybe more on that, Hubert's going to spend, and along with his staff, is going to spend a majority of the offseason just trying to bring kids in and find the right fit. And not only bring them in, AJ, but bed them into a team and get them to understand and come together as one and kind of get that stated mission and stated goal together. So when next season comes around, they're ready to go and can have a positive season. So talk to me about that kind of fork in the road this program's at right now, because I think it's very interesting. And in a lot of ways, AJ, we haven't seen this kind of situation in a program at North Carolina since, I mean, dare I say it, the Matt Doherty era? I mean, has there been a kind of point in this program since then? Because I don't necessarily remember one.
Well, a Hall of Famer replaced Matt and did Hall of Fame stuff. So
exactly.
No, they haven't. It's the second time they've been in this situation. But it's a different situation than Matt because Hubert doesn't mistreat guys.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. 100%.
And I don't want to beat up Matt. It was 20 years ago. I don't want to be judged on the way I was 20 years ago. So I'm not going to judge Matt Doherty in the way he was 20 years ago. I don't think that's fair or really all that relevant. I think what matters is what Hubert does now. And he needs to bring in some starters, but he just needs to bring in guys that fit as well. He's got his anchor up top in RJ, anchor down low in Armando. I think there's tremendous optimism about what Jalen Washington can be. I think there is tremendous belief that Simeon Wilcher is going to be very good from the get-go. I think there's cautious optimism about what Zayden High will be able to contribute as a freshman next year. And he's a stretch 4 kind of guy, which is why I think with Washington and High, I've been saying all along, go get a 3 and then get a long 3, someone that can also play the 4. If Washington's still in his process or in early stages of his process and High's not 100% ready, you've got a 6'7" long 3 that can play 4. And you could play 4 out and 1 in, and need someone that can use the baseline well. You could have a lot of cutting, a lot of slashing and stuff like that. I think that is what they need to do and very well might be what they're looking at. So in a way, I hope he doesn't just get straight up starters right out of the gate and then everyone else is going to be banished to the bench. He probably needs to grow as a coach. He needs to have okay, here's my 8, and I need to play the 8 that kind of fit on certain nights. So I'm always going to play RJ 35 minutes. I'm always going to play Armando 32, 35 minutes. Jalen's going to play 20. Wilcher's going to play 25. Okay, where do the other minutes come from? And how do I use that group to deal with certain types of teams that you go up against? That would help him grow as a coach. I think one of the things that stagnated him as a coach is the fact that he didn't use the bench. He said he was going to use it. He didn't use it. And because of that, he was sort of stuck in quicksand as a coach because he didn't trust his players and didn't trust himself enough, in my opinion. And I'm not saying this was consciously, I think it's subconscious, to pull the trigger on certain guys.
Yeah.
And Pete's not helping. I've got it. There was that period leading up to, was it the NC State game maybe, where everybody thought that Hubert was going to make a change.
Yeah, it was State, yeah.
But he started because there was still a significant drop between Pete and the next guy, be it Puff or whoever. So he did start. And Hubert may have given serious consideration to it, but didn't do it. So part of this is a messaging thing too. He kind of created some of these public skirmishes with respect to his coaching himself by some of the things that he said in press conferences and then didn't back it up with action. We'll do that later on. We'll have a press conference about Hubert in general and his messaging and stuff, but he needs to have guys that give him options. And he needs to not be I'll say afraid. It's not the right word. He should not be apprehensive about using those guys. So one of the good things about bringing in a bunch of dudes, when he brought in those guys 2 years ago, Garcia was playing a ton. He was starting. He was playing Justin McCoy a lot first 6 weeks of the season. So he was playing the guys he brought in. He gave them opportunities. I think what you'll see this year, let's say they bring in 4, they're all going to play. Now, I think they're all going to be very different in the sense that this guy has that role, that guy has this role, that guy has this role. I really think they're going to bring a backup 5. Someone that can back up Armando, and someone that would be very happy in a role of 7 to 10 minutes a game at North Carolina, being a part of that program, that family, that culture, that lore, that laundry, that building, that the whole fabled nature of the program. There's a lot of guys out there would say, yeah, sign me up. So they need to find the guy that says, sign me up, and that can handle 7 to 10 minutes a game behind Armando. And if he tweaks an ankle or if he gets in foul trouble, he can give you 20, 25. And then you work out High in Washington or whoever else you bring in to fill out that spot. Otherwise, that's one they got to do. I still think they've got their 2-3 in Wojcik, who could be reserved 2-3. Some nights he might play. I think he's going to play a lot of 3. And watching him at Brown, I see a lot of 3 in him, especially if you have Wilcher and Davis in the backcourt and you got a guy like Wojcik. Hubert wants his stuff spread. If you want to pull the double away from Armando and let him dominate, you've got to have guys that do that. And Wojcik's a good shooter from outside. He's a good passer from outside. He's got a 3 dribble pull-up in the game, pull-up jumper in the lane game. So you need to find then a 3 who's a slasher, who's a guy that can take a dime off the top of the backboard like David Thompson. And then you got to find a 3/4 who's a bouncy guy, can shoot some threes, but also a weak side guy. You want a weak side rebounder. You want a guy who can play the opposite baseline. You want a guy that can put the ball on the floor and create some stuff, but also find teammates. So often this year, the ball would get to the corner and would get stuck there. The ball would get out to the beyond the elbow and it would get stuck there because guys would pick up their dribble. If guys are moving and you've got bouncy options and there are more things dudes can do when they get the ball or in order to get the ball to get themselves open, then you're not going to get stuck as much. Then when dudes aren't going to pick up their dribble and just stagnate for a moment, they're going to pick up the dribble because they're going to feed somebody. And there's so many things this team needs, but I think Hubert wants to play, and I don't think the sets were as much his desire long-term as it was. Maybe he thought that was the best way for this group to get buckets because they had some limitations, some bounce limitations. They weren't very athletic. So I think his vision moving forward is to have a springier bunch that doesn't have to run as much set stuff, that can play off of each other. And I think that's what they're trying to identify in the portal. Yeah. And so whatever he brings in, and I'm not going to say he has the pick of the litter because there are a lot of other schools that are appealing, and there's also money being promised that North Carolina's not going to promise right now. So they do have their hands tied a little bit, but still 80% of the guys in the portal would jump at the chance to put that uniform on and play there. So there are a lot of really good players that he has a chance to bring in, and it's going to be really interesting to see who he brings in because we're going to be able to know exactly how he wants to play moving forward, not just for 24, but 25, 26, 27, 28 moving forward, provided he's still the head coach.
It's a fascinating offseason because in so many ways, the success of next season, which could have, if there isn't a successful product on the court, could have so many different implications for so many different people that it has to get this offseason right. Because if you don't get the offseason right now, you don't bring in the right kids, don't really stand a chance next year in the first place because you have to have the right personnel. I think we've seen with Hubert and his system and what he's trying to do in year 3. He's got to have the right system and he's got to have the right kids in order to be able to run that system. So it's just fascinating in that respect because usually you're just thinking, you know what, like I said, we've talked about it a lot. I got these guys coming back, these guys are coming back in, okay, I know what I have to work with. I just need to improve some of these guys, maybe tweak a couple things, and we can be really good again next year. Now it's like, no, I've got to bring in the right kids that fit my system and then hope they bed in right and hope they can handle the pressures and expectations that come along with playing at North Carolina. And then we can see if we can get this thing back on track. So just a massive offseason and a fascinating one to follow.
Also that fit RJ and Armando, because
true. They've got a nice little
RJ and Armando, top and down low. They're the constants now. Mm-hmm. So what were the other issues last year? Well, Caleb was an issue because of incredible inconsistency in shot selection, and you couldn't pencil him in for anything. We addressed that in another podcast, right?
Yeah.
Pete was an issue because he was a 5 that they were trying to make play 4, and it wasn't going to happen. He was a 5. He was a 5. He was a giraffe and a zebra, right? Mm-hmm. So he was a 5. That's what he was, and it wasn't going to work. And then Leaky, for all the wonderful attributes that Leaky brings, and as much as I like Leaky was not a consistent scorer. So you had giant question marks over 3 of the 5 spots on an Iron 5 type situation, right? Now he has chances to erase those question marks by who he brings in and puts in there. I think it's kind of exciting for a guy covering the team. And I would think for Hubert, there's almost like a rejuvenation in the sense that, look, I've still got 2 like really mature, really smart, high basketball IQ,
all ACC guys,
all ACC guys. National, RJ Davis had 12 rebounds in the national championship game. 6 offensive, right?
They caught 3rd team All-American last year.
So you've got 2 great pieces to build around. And I think it's kind of exciting. From a journalistic standpoint, we're kind of morphing into the offseason. We've still got spring football for a couple more weeks. And at some point, we want to have our offseason so we can be human beings. But at the same time, this is kind of fun stuff because it's new, it's different. It's not like North Carolina is Portal U. In fact, I know a few people who are Carolina fans that were really irritated when they lost to Pittsburgh because, quote, they have all those portal guys. That's not a real program. Well, guess what? Welcome to the party. Welcome to the party, everybody, because that's now going to be North Carolina.
Yeah, it really is. And in some ways it's good. It allows you to kind of reshape things and do things at times. It allows you to maybe not force guys out, but say, hey, like, can't promise you a starting spot next year. I'm going to recruit over you because I need to bring in some guys that fit this system a little bit more with what I'm trying to do. So I think in that respect, it is a big positive. And I'll add this too, just to leave it on a little more of a positive note. I know some of the transfers that Hubert has brought in didn't really work out. Nance didn't really work out. For me, the Nance one never really made a lot of sense. And I will label a little bit of criticism at Hubert because, again, we've talked about it. I just felt like it was for what he was being asked to do. That's just not the type of player he was. So I don't really necessarily understand why he was brought in the first place. Justin McCoy, I don't know what the plan was with that, but it didn't work out for whatever reason. Dawson Garcia.
Insurance. He was brought in for insurance. He's nearby. He's from Cary. He wanted out of UVA. He was insurance. Good kid. I think he's a highly skilled basketball player. He just doesn't have that Power 5 level of spring and athletic ability. If he was 10% more athletic, he would play a lot at a lot of places because he's a wonderfully skilled guy. You know, because I told you, you were watching him before. We're not going to go all Justin McCoy here, but I think he was brought in for insurance. And as I said before, I went back and listened to every Tony Bennett press conference during Justin McCoy's sophomore year at Virginia. And whenever he mentioned Justin, he talked about toughness, rebounding, and he was the guy that replaced Jay Huff. So he played, and he had a regular role. He played 11 minutes a game on a team that won the ACC regular season title.
Yeah, he's a good player.
I also think Hubert thought he was going to get a little bit more from Justin, and he did.
Yeah. And again, in not criticizing Justin, it just, for whatever reason, his role, basically what happened last year, his minutes just really went down, whether that's him or Hubert or whatever. It doesn't really matter at this point. And you've also got Dawson Garcia, who we've already talked about, last year with him leaving the program for more off the court reasons than anything. But so you look at those guys, and you're like, okay, some of the transfers we brought in didn't really work out. But I think one of the positive notes to look at is just how well Brady Manick worked out for the team and how much of a great fit he was for the program and how much that transfer made sense and impacted what Carolina was able to do last year. Because I think from what we've seen this year, I know it's simple to just say, well, maybe if they had Brady Manick, they would have been better this year. I think it's a little bit too simplistic, but he just fit so much of what they were trying to do in last year's run and was so incredibly important to it that this should fill you with some confidence that Hubert can go and find guys. He does know what he's looking for. He does know what kind of guys that he needs, and he can attract those guys as well. So, yeah, I think I'll leave it on that kind of positive note, because I will say this, AJ, is the last thing I'll say. There are a lot of Carolina fans out there that are concerned. There's a lot of Carolina fans out of there that are underwhelmed because Paxton Wojcik committed the same day Caleb Love left. And like you said, this is just a replacement for Love. What a drop off. That's not what it is. But I think you do have to trust the process. You do have to give Hubert a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. You have to trust that he can bring in and attract the right players for what he's trying to do. So I think that is a reason to be optimistic this offseason, because trust me, AJ, when Hubert brings these guys in, no matter who they are, there's going to be excitement. There's new faces. There's going to be excitement from the fan base. They're going to be fired up again. And there will be some criticism thrown at them as well. So massive offseason ahead. And it's going to be a really fun one to kind of see how it shapes out.
And I'm going to close reminding people of this. And by the way, Paxton Wojcik had a pretty nice game in Chapel Hill 2 years ago. Brown almost beat North Carolina in the Dean Dome. Mm-hmm. So go back and look at that game from November of 21. What I'm going to part with is this. Do not worry about where guys are coming from. Mm-hmm. I've said this 1,000 times in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Doesn't matter where they play, because they're all over the place. There are guys that are all over the place. Marquise Noel from Kansas State came from Little Rock. All right. Look at Miami. You got Arkansas State and George Mason. Here are the schools of guys on teams that went to the Elite Eight, right? Arkansas State, George Mason, you've got Seattle University, Little Rock, you've got Northeastern. I can go on and on. Baylor won a national championship 2 years ago, and one of their starters was a transfer from UNC Asheville. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Dudes can play, especially when you're bringing in older guys. College basketball is an older dude's game. Look at the Final Four. Look at Miami. It's an old team. So it's an older team. It's an older guy's game. And there are no, as David said the other night, there are no McDonald's All-Americans in the Final Four. None. But there are a lot of guys from small schools that started at small schools, small programs. So don't worry about where they come from. Don't worry about that he came from Brown. Brown merely beat your Tar Heels 2 years ago, year and a half ago. So let it go. Mm-hmm. If a guy can play and he can help you, then a guy can play and he can help you.
Yeah, period. No doubt. And again, you have to trust what the staff is trying to bring in. You have to, no matter where they come from, there's obviously something they like about them. There's obviously something they've seen in them, or they wouldn't be bringing them in the first place. So you got to give them a little benefit of the doubt and trust in that as well. And again, we'll see what happens. We'll be doing podcasts this time a year from now, and we may be having a very different conversation than now, and maybe having more negative conversations like we've kind of had to have this offseason too. So we'll see. Only time would tell, but it will be a really interesting offseason and a massive offseason, not only for Hubert, but in a lot of ways, when you look at the program over the last 4 years in particular, it's kind of a massive offseason for the program and the direction it's more than likely going to end up going in. So we'll be here to cover it every step.
Hubert's at a fork in the road, and North Carolina basketball's at a fork in the road. A temporary one, because it'll fix itself regardless of what happens.
No doubt. Yeah.
But for the immediate future, there's a fork in the road. We've said that like 12 times tonight. So maybe that should be our logo. That should be our logo through April. Fork in the road.
We put a fork on the thumbnail just so people know we're going to reference it.
I was looking to see if I have it in my office. I don't think so. I eat my office a lot of times because that's just the way I grind. But no fork in here.
No, unfortunately not, man. We'll go ahead and wrap this one up, AJ. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another episode of the THI podcast. Appreciate y'all watching. As always, make sure you give this video a like. Make sure you head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com. Sign up for just $8.33 a month, where you can be a Carolina insider too. We'll obviously, we have a lot of scoops already on the boards about kind of certain guys that Carolina's going after in the transfer portal. I know you've been all over it. David's been all over it in particular. So make sure you sign up for that if you want a little bit more insider information, a little bit more behind the scenes info on what's going into this process for Hubert Davis and his staff. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.